Okay, obviously, unfortunately, yesterday the sad news of the passing of Walter Smith, the former Rangers and Scotland manager. Very unexpected news. Very sad news if you are actually a Rangers fan. He's very fondly remembered on the blue side of Glasgow. Um, Very interesting career. We're going to look at the career of Walter Smith, both as a player and as a manager. He was born in Lanark on the 24th of February 1948. He begins his professional footballing journey in 1966 after a spell playing in the amateur ranks, in the amateur leagues in Scotland. Dundee United decide, we're going to have this guy as one of our defenders. We're going to sign him. And he signs his first professional contract in 1966. He's with Dundee United in his first spell as a player there until 1975, with a very brief loan spell in 1967 at the Dallas Tornado. In his first spell at Dundee United, he plays 108 times and scores his only 2 professional goals in football. He is a defender's defender. Very solid at the back, not really known for going forward and scoring goals. He plays 3 games at the Dallas Tornado in 1967, and this is a very interesting thing. In the late 60s to the mid 80s, there was a lot of European players who went over to the US to ply their trade for brief spells. George Best and Pele being probably the most famous during this period to do so. The game in the US at the time was very badly structured, badly funded. There wasn't really an overall league, so teams would pop up and disappear very quickly. Obviously now with the MLS and the fact they've had a World Cup in '94, they're going to have the World Cup in 4 years' time as well, co-hosting with Canada and Mexico. The game has completely changed in the US now. There's now a professional, obviously the professional MLS, and there's actually professional lower leagues as well. And the growth of the game, helped by players like David Beckham, Steven Gerrard, Andrea Pirlo, Kaká, they've gone over and Zlatan Ibrahimovic, I think, is obviously the latest real big name European or South American player to go over there, and they've really showcased their skills. And they've sold the game to the American fan base. And the league's expanding every year. New teams are joining. Crowd numbers are really healthy. While it's not the highest quality football, you could argue, it's very entertaining. I've watched a few games, and if it wasn't for these pioneers in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, like Walter Smith going over there to play, I'm not sure they get the World Cup in '94. I'm not sure if the MLS becomes a thing. There was a lot of failure along the way. There were some doubters. So thank Walter Smith and his contemporaries for giving it a go in the 60s, 70s, and 80s when there didn't seem to be a hope for a professional league being successful in the US. So there is now. After his first spell at Dundee United, back to playing football, he joins Dumbarton for a couple of seasons between 75 and 77, where he plays 44 times. No goals scored. He then finished his career at Dundee United, returning in 1977 till 1980, where he plays 26 further games. But it's during this last spell at Dundee United he starts managing as well. He starts managing the Scottish under-18s in 1978. He then moves on in that period until 1986 to the under-21s. So he starts his coaching and managerial career with the age groups under the Scottish FA. But then after 86, there's a gap of 5 years where he's not coaching, he's not managing, and he's without work until Rangers come along in 1991 until 1998, his first spell, which is a very successful spell. Only one season in that spell did he not win the league title. He won the league title his first 6 seasons in a row. That is ridiculous. I understand, obviously, the Scottish League has not been the most competitive league, with only 2 teams winning the title since the mid-80s. Aberdeen being the last challengers to the old firm. But to win it 6 times in a row, and especially the first time in club management as well, takes some doing. And Steven Gerrard looks likely to win back-to-back titles as things currently stand with Rangers. But that takes some doing to hit the ground running in your first club job and then continue to win constantly. And it's because of this first spell at Rangers that the Premier League comes knocking with Everton. Now, he doesn't win any silverware at Everton, and Everton at this point are a lower mid-table side. They're not as competitive as they should be. Their last trophy came a few years before in 1995 with the FA Cup, so they haven't been challenging for silverware. So between 1998 and 2002, he's managing an average Everton side. And this is an Everton side that, is not the side it was in the 80s, which was a very good, successful team, overshadowed by their rivals Liverpool. And if Liverpool hadn't been the best team in the country, Everton probably would have been the best team in the country, quite frank, if we're honest. It just so happened their neighbours across Stanley Park were a little bit more successful. But Everton, solid if not outstanding lower mid-table side. His win percentage also would tell you that. His win percentage at Rangers is in the 60s. At Everton is in the 40s. And that's still a good win percentage for a team that's not competing for trophies. That's just solid. But he lays the foundation for Everton to be taken over by David Moyes. They get to an FA Cup final a few years after he moves on from Everton. I think 5 seasons after he moves on. So he laid the foundations for some of the Everton players that we see in the later 2000s and the early 2010s. So he lays the foundations of that club, but no silverware. But his time at Everton attracts the attention of another Scot who manages in the Premier League, a certain Sir Alex Ferguson at Manchester United, who employs him in the second half of the 2003-2004 season as his assistant. And I think he learns a lot from Ferguson, to be quite frank, because the Scottish FA come knocking for a second time. He's made the manager of Scotland for 3 years between 2004 and 2007. Unfortunately, Scotland at this point they're in the doldrums. The last tournament they qualified for was in '98 for the World Cup. Their world ranking and their form is plummeting. They're not going well, basically. I would say it's a poison chalice. I mean, Scotland obviously qualified for this year's Euros, which should have been played last year. Their first tournament in over 20 years. Yeah, not an overly successful spell with Scotland. There were some bad defeats in there. And there were some question marks over Walter Smith as manager or the quality of Scottish football. And yes, the Scottish League isn't the most competitive, but I think another problem is Scotland isn't developing the players it was back in the 80s and the 90s. And there were some very good Scottish players, actually from the 60s and 70s as well. The development of youth and the development of player quality has been a weakness for Scottish football for quite some time. But he's manager of Scotland for 3 years. Rangers come calling again in 2007, and he's appointed for a second spell in charge, which ends with financial difficulties, obviously are well noted, well documented. But in his first season, he guides Rangers to the Europa League final. And yes, he does win silverware in that period as well. It's the financial difficulties towards the end that curtails his managerial career in 2011. Now let's look at the trophies he's won as Rangers manager. He won an under-18s tournament as well with the under-18 Scottish side as well early in his managerial career. But his club career at Rangers is ridiculous. Between 1990 and 1997, he wins the league 6 times. 6. 5 in a row. I should actually make it. I made a brief mistake at the beginning of the video. 5 in a row. Only 2 seasons in that first spell does he not win the league title. In his second spell, he wins the league title 3 times in a row. So that's 9 titles in total. So between 2008-2009 season and 2010-2011, that's 3 in a row as well. That is pretty hard to do. That is a lot of titles. The Scottish Cup, he wins 5 times. His first spell, he wins 3. His second spell, he wins 2. In his first spell, the 91-92, 92-93, that's back-to-back. Also 95-96. And in his second spell, 07-08 and the 08-09 season, so again, back-to-back winning the Scottish Cup. The Scottish League Cup, he wins back-to-back in his first spell with 92-93 and 93-94. Oh, I did get that right. It is 6 times. I miscounted. He also wins it in 96-97. And then in 07-08 in his second spell, and then back-to-back in 09-10 and 2010-2011. So he wins that 6 times. In total, 20 trophies he brings to Ibrox. And what is another little unknown fact is Rangers is actually the most successful club team for trophies won in history. And you could argue, they play in the Scottish League system. Only 2 teams are going to win the league every year. The last time a non-Old Firm team won was Aberdeen, back in the mid-80s under, Sir Alex Ferguson, his former boss at Manchester United. Of course, St Johnstone winning the Cup double last season is now, hopefully the trend is going away from the old firm just dominating all the time. But you can't take away what he did with that Rangers side, dominating Celtic for most of the 90s, and the beginning of the 2010s as well, dominating, and by quite some margin. Unfortunately, the financial issues that obviously are well documented with Rangers and the reformation of the club going down to Scottish League Two and having to fight their way back up to the top flight. It's only taken until last year under Steven Gerrard for them to win trophies again. Very troubled financial issues, a lot of financial issues off the field. He was reapproached by Rangers and by Scotland in recent years to come back into management. He turned them down. But in 2013, he got his honorary doctorate for services to sport. That managerial career at Rangers, I mean, if they don't appoint Walter Smith, who do they appoint? And do they win as many trophies without Walter Smith as manager? And would they be the most successful club side in football without Walter Smith? Or would have Celtic got more trophies in there, and with the Scottish Cup like Hearts and Hibs, and of course St Johnstone in recent years and Kilmarnock, these other clubs, would they have got more Scottish Cups and more Scottish League Cups in that period if it wasn't for Walter Smith and his management? Very, very underrated. I think because he managed predominantly in Scotland, people underrate him as a manager. But just look at the honours list there. Could another Scottish manager at Rangers do that? Or any manager at Rangers do what he did? That is a question. I wouldn't, if Ferguson wasn't at United and then Rangers had come calling, possibly. But I think it's Alex Ferguson at Man United. That speaks for itself. And we can look at his playing a managerial career in the trophies Alex Ferguson has won, which is a lot. We can look at the managerial career of Arsene Wenger, for example. And again, the trophies won is a lot. But Walter Smith's managerial career at Rangers, outstanding. And to be fair, his time at Everton, they weren't bad. They just weren't great. And of course, that comes down to transfer policy, player development, and how the league being more competitive in England. Much more competitive. I mean, look, it took Liverpool 30 years to win a league title again. And Liverpool have had some very good sides in that time. 30 years. So, yes, the Scottish League is less competitive. But to dominate, and when I say dominate, I mean, crikey, they're 6 out of 8 seasons they win the league, 5 in a row. And then in the second spell, 3 in a row. That is very, very hard to do. Yes, admittedly, you could say he was less successful in his second spell as Rangers manager. Yes, that is true. He was. But winning the league title 9 times, Scottish Cup 5 times, and the Scottish League Cup 6 times, that is a fair bit of silverware for one manager to get. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Obviously, the sad news of Walter Smith's passing, but and people forget that Dundee United, he is obviously a stalwart of that club. A very unremarkable playing career, but sometimes it's those unremarkable players who make very, very good managers. And people, you look at some of these superstar players, they don't often make good managers. It's normally the average players who really have to think of the game more and study the game more who make better managers. So there we go. Thank you very much for watching. Please place your thoughts below, and I'll have some more videos for you very, very soon.